Honorable Men Discord. Riots in LA over ICE. Let's talk about it.
How you see yourself is how you perceived. I see a man strong, gifted, head strapping, never down on his knees, begging. Gotta make a way, even in my darkest hour. Say the odds against me was new. I would never cower.
All right, welcome back to another episode. As always, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and let's get straight into it. So there's riots going on right now in LA, and it's all due to ICE and those that are against the idea of what Trump has put into place, the rounding up of illegal immigrants. All right. Now, ICE, for those of you that didn't know what it stood for, is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, the police department and other politicians are against Trump because they didn't ask for the additional assistance with the National Guards. But this is one of those things where it's, you can say Trump's being proactive. You can say he's just he's a little too aggressive with his decision making. Call it what you want. Let's take a look at this news report and we'll talk about it further.
7:08 right now, happening right now. Nearly 300 National Guard members are in Los Angeles after a third straight day of protests. Rioters yesterday set self-driving cars on fire in downtown as protesters blocked a freeway. The city's police chief says the situation is getting dangerous for both the public and his law enforcement officers. He's also reinforcing that his department is not part of ICE.
Unequivocally clear. The Los Angeles Police Department does not participate in or coordinate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement on civil immigration enforcement. We've said this over and over again, and I can't stress it enough for the people in our community who have high levels of anxiety about this issue, that we want everybody to believe and be able to call the LAPD in time of need if they've been a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime. We need that. Otherwise, the system does not work. This violence that I've seen is disgusting. It's escalated now since the beginning of this incident. What we saw the first night was bad. What we've seen subsequent to that is getting increasingly worse and more violent. Tonight we had individuals out there shooting commercial-grade fireworks at our officers. That can kill you. And we have adapted our tactics to be able to have a chance to be able to take these people into custody and to be able to hold them accountable. We are overwhelmed as far as the number of people out there engaged in this type of activity.
I have to say something before this video is finished. For those of you watching this episode, what is your thoughts on the fact that we're not on the same accord, right? Now, you don't have to agree with all the things that President Trump has put into place, and I get it. I get the reasons why some of you all don't like President Trump, and I also understand why some people like President Trump. But here's the thing: he's in office, all right. And I've said this before. I think in an earlier episode, at an earlier episode when I started this channel. He's in office. He's the president. Where is the respect for his decision making? Now, granted, what you'll hear from, I think, in this news report, he overstepped, if that's even possible as the president. He overstepped some of the officials in California and made the decision to disperse National Guard. My thing is, although I understand this, I guess it's a police chief or lieutenant, I'm not sure his rank, although he's speaking on the fact that, listen, he's making it clear to the public, listen, the police department has nothing to do with the rounding up or the I don't want to say agenda. The police department has nothing to do with what ICE is in charge of doing. Their protocol, their mission. The police department has nothing to do with it. The LAPD has nothing to do with it. Although he's clarifying that for the public, I believe that he should have said, we are working with them in respect to, what the president has put into place. but do understand, he should have elaborated a little bit further, but it sounds like he's just trying to separate himself, and that causes conflict because, those that work for ICE, those that work in the police department, those that work in the National Guard, they all have orders that they are responsible to carry out, right? Whether they like it or not, it's part of their job. I put that in quotations because a lot of people like to throw out that statement, do your job, right? So LAPD has a job to do, the National Guard has a job to do, ICE has a job to do. The last thing I believe any of those departments should be doing is speaking out against the other departments, because then that sounds like it's complete chaos. You think there's chaos going on right now in the streets with people lighting fireworks and aiming it towards the police officers? I understand why he's saying it. He's saying it just to protect his police officers, but in turn he's also making conflict with the other departments. You guys have to work together, and whether or not the politicians and those in place in California like the fact of what President Trump did, he's still the president of the United States. All right. And to speak out against him. Now, obviously, these are the rights we have as Americans, but this causes further chaos. You're not working together. The different departments are not working together. They're speaking out against each other. Whether directly or indirectly, it still doesn't look good. And that's my thoughts on it. What's your thoughts on this? Let me continue.
But things that they're doing, they'll take backpacks, and the backpack will have a cinder block in it. They have a hammer, and they'll break up the cinder block and use that, pass it around to throw at officers, to throw at cars, and throw at other people. We've seen people with hammers, and you've broadcasted breaking the bollards behind the federal building and taking the rocks, if you will, or pieces of concrete, and throwing them at officers. We've had liquid of who knows what description thrown at officers. There's no limit to what they're doing to our officers.
Now, those protests continued all night. In fact, reporter Rob Scott got a first-hand look at some of those dangerous fireworks that you just heard the chief mention. Take a look at this.
Well, the chaos here in downtown Los Angeles continues tonight. I got to say, it doesn't feel like the LA we all know and are familiar with. This feels like some sort of third world conflict zone. I mean, we have fires burning in the middle of intersections. We have police and law enforcement agencies under constant attack by these protesters. They have had rocks hurled through the windscreen. And now they are firing fireworks directly at officers who have backed off a bit, I've got to say. And as the night has worn on, the number of protesters certainly has dwindled, but the ones left are the real anarchists, the ones who are intent on causing the most damage, the most mayhem. Donald Trump, as we know, has ordered in 2,000 National Guardsmen, he says, to basically crush these riots. The California governor, Gavin Newsom, warned that sending in those troops would only make things worse, be inflammatory, and that certainly does appear to be the case. And now we are learning that the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has more than 500 active duty Marines on standby to come in here if necessary. So as the night is wearing on, tensions are not dissipating. Things are only going to get worse, I fear. I'm Rob Scott in downtown Los Angeles. Back to you.
It's an incredible scene there. Just the authorities try to keep violence from escalating. The city officials are trying to keep people calm as National Guard troops move in.
California lawmakers also accusing the Trump administration of trying to make things worse. NBC's Chris Pallone has more.
As violent unrest in downtown Los Angeles spills into a fourth day, President Trump is defending his decision to deploy National Guard troops there against the wishes of California's governor.
We're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart.
The protests began in response to ongoing immigration raids. Federal agents arresting about 150 migrants around L.A. Protests, which started peacefully, turned violent, with demonstrators burning cars and throwing bottles and chunks of concrete at police.
These kids on the car, The folks that are taking advantage of this, these aren't peaceful protesters, a lot of these folks.
California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom blaming President Trump for inflaming a tense situation. It's the first time a president has activated a state's National Guard force without a request from the state's governor since the civil rights era.
Donald Trump has created the conditions you see on your TV tonight. He's exacerbated the conditions.
In D.C., lawmakers divided.
My concern, of course, is that this inflames the situation and that he is hell-bent on inflaming the situation.
One of our core principles is maintaining peace through strength. We do that on foreign affairs and domestic affairs as well. I don't think that's heavy-handed.
Meanwhile, the administration is threatening to arrest any state and local officials who interfere with immigration enforcement.
Stand in the way of law and order, yeah, they will face charges.
A political standoff still simmering as the situation on the ground boils over. The president activated a total of 2,000 National Guard troops in California. About 300 are on the streets of Los Angeles right now. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said active duty Marines are ready to deploy to California if the White House deems it necessary. In Washington, Chris Pallone, NBC News.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but when the brush fires were going on for days, because it wasn't just a one-day thing.
Democracy depends on a free press.
When the brush fire was going on in California, I believe the president wasn't pleased with the fact that California officials didn't seem to have it under control. And then there was a whole shortage of water. You all remember that? I remember it. You know, I don't live in California, but I paid attention to it just a little bit, right? So the president was not pleased with the officials in California, and I believe it's possible, and don't quote me on this, I believe he wasn't pleased with the governor about that whole water situation, right? So here we are again now with the with this riot now, and love him or hate him, one thing you got to respect about President Trump, and you could disagree with me in the comments, just keep it respectful, but by all means, speak your mind in the comments. The man has balls, and as a man, you got to make decisions sometimes that is not favorable to everyone, and you got to stand on it. You just got to make the decision. You got to make the tough decisions. That's another saying, you know. You got to make the tough decisions. It's not the decisions that everyone is willing to make, but that's what separates the real men from the boys, is making those tough decisions, right? And President Trump made it. He made a call, because so here's the thing. So you got that the police officer, again, I think he was the chief, or I don't know his rank, right? Captain, chief. He was a high-ranking police officer, speaking on the fact that he was trying to clarify to the public, listen, we're not, he was, without saying it, he was saying, we're not the enemies, we're not the one, we're not with ICE. That's, you know, ICE is doing the roundup, we're not rounding up people, we're LAPD. This is pretty much what he was saying, right? To disassociate himself and his men and women of the LAPD from those that work for ICE. First of all, when you're dealing with riots, you're not necessarily dealing with people with level-headed minds, right? So you saying that doesn't necessarily mean that the riots are going to stop. You think the rioters care if you say, hey, we're just the police, we're not with ICE? Some may not. When riots start, when it starts moving, when it's in motion, it's like a snowball effect. It could start off not being violent, then it turns to violence, then it turns to being destructive. Many times when riots happen, it's a free-for-all. You know, people use that as opportunists, use it as opportunities to break into businesses. It has nothing to do with the actual cause. It has nothing to do with the actual cause. There's protests that have taken place that were peaceful that turned into riots. Why? Because there's groups of individuals that their main goal is destruction and burglary and things of that nature, and they latch onto it. They find themselves intertwined in peaceful protests, and then they take advantage. They find an opportunity and they take advantage of that opportunity, and they do destructive things, illegal things. So with that being said, President Trump, you know, they said this is the first time since like the civil rights that executive decision was made from the president that to go like overstep the elected officials in the state. He's just being proactive, like I said earlier, because who's to say the riot would be under control by the PD? Who's to say they have enough men and women to control it as it continues to grow? And yes, the PD, LAPD officers are being attacked, but it might be taxing on that department, the various departments in those areas. It's going to be taxing. It's going to be a lot of overtime. A lot of people are tired. A lot of people are just fatigued trying to control large groups of people that are out of control. So, in short, do I disagree with the president releasing the National Guard, dispersing the National Guard? I don't disagree with it at all. I don't disagree with it. And if you disagree with it, I'll see you in the comments. Let's talk about it. But I don't disagree with it. I don't disagree with it. Because it's a lose-lose. And this is why he's the president. And and that goes for any president. It's not just about if Trump's in office and whether or not you like Trump. That's the president's job, is to make the tough decisions. The president is overseeing the entire country. He's not just for any one particular state. He's overseeing the entire country. And unfortunately for LA, he already experienced LA with the brush fires. Right. And even whilst the brush fire, that one particular brush fire was going on, the one that took out a lot of homes, which they normally all do take out homes, there was about to be another one activated and people were caught trying to start up another fire. But I don't disagree with Trump at all. I think, put out the National Guard to show people like, listen, whatever you're thinking you're about to create and start, if you want to try to start a domino effect, it's not happening because we have troops out. The only downside to all of this is, they mentioned the Marines and stuff like that. Obviously with the National Guard is if the people start to try to attack the National Guard and then there's fatalities behind it. That's going to be a bad thing. But what's the other solution? Leave it on the department, the LAPD. There's other things the LAPD has to deal with besides riots. Because if I need to remind everyone, is the police department is also responsible for the lesser calls compared to this, of course. The domestic calls, the homicides, the accidents. They got to respond to all of that. And so now they also have to try to navigate their manpower for riots. I mean, come on. I think President Trump did the right thing. If you disagree with me, I'll see you in the comments. But that's my thoughts on all of this. What's your thoughts? As always, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next episode.